Hey, it's NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbong. Because of the way our fractured media environment works today, it's really hard to grasp how famous people used to be. Today's episode can serve as a reminder. In a bit, we speak with the one and only Shirley MacLaine about her new memoir. But first, the new Johnny Carson biography, Carson the Magnificent, does what any great biography should at least aim to do: capture the subject in all their faults and complexities. And co-author Mike Thomas spoke with NPR's Scott Simon about what made Carson such an engaging and endearing late-night host to millions of people, but also what fractured his relationships with his own family. That's coming up.
Support for NPR and the following message come from LinkedIn Ads. As a B2B marketer, you know how noisy the digital ad space can be. If your message isn't targeted to the right audience, it just disappears into the noise. By using LinkedIn Ads, you can reach professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Target them by job title, industry, company, and more. Get a $100 credit on your next campaign at linkedin.com/book. Terms and conditions apply.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Johnny.
Might be hard to grasp today just how big Johnny Carson was. He hosted The Tonight Show from 1962 until 1992, a bedtime companion for 9 million viewers each night, and his famed names lined up to sit on his couch. Over time, Johnny's name became as big as their own. Esquire magazine's Bill Zehme began a biography of Johnny Carson in 2002 and interviewed the man himself as well as friends, competitors, ex-wives, and family. When Bill died of cancer in 2023, Mike Thomas, who had once been arts and entertainment writer at the Chicago Sun-Times, took over what had become a huge literary project. Their new book, Carson the Magnificent. It's an unblinking look at a man who entertained millions, but could be remote and even mean to those closest to him. Mike Thomas joins us now from the studios of WBEZ in Chicago. Mike, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
How big was Johnny Carson? Help us understand that.
I think Johnny Carson was, as the great Bill Carter, the chronicler of late night, recently called him, probably the biggest star on television ever. I mean, Carson started his show in 1962, quickly became a phenomenon, and was on television when there weren't that many channels. But he was at the top of his game, and everybody watched it.
And what did you find when you took over this project?
I found a lot of material, stacks and stacks of material that I had to wade through that Bill had collected, transcripts from people and shows, and all kinds of artifacts, a big pink check from Johnny to Doc Severinsen, his band leader, an ugly Johnny Carson collection tie. Bill had everything.
How did magic change Johnny Carson's life?
Well, I mean, magic was his first form of performing, and he retained this fascination with magic throughout his life and career. I think he loved being able to pull one over on people. Mm-hmm. He loved the skills involved in magic, the sleight of hand, and the secrets that magicians kept. And Johnny did a lot of disappearing himself. He wasn't a very revelatory guy. He would reveal himself in bits and pieces during the show, mostly in his monologues or maybe in guest interviews and stuff like that. But he was kind of a disappearing act himself, especially off stage. A lot of what he had was internal, and only select people got to see that part of him.
What was his great gift as a host, do you think?
I think Johnny always thought his great gift, and I think this is partly true, was his empathy with the audience, this sort of connection he had. He could sense the way the room felt, the way jokes were going.
I know you're not doing well when a guy calls for the paramedics during the monologue. Anybody remember what I was talking about?
He had this perfectly cool demeanor for a cool medium. And he came across as this very earthy guy who had conversations with guests and who had this very sort of tight rapport with his audience. It was a facade. It wasn't actually tight, but I think that's the way a lot of people felt. And, you know, he would put people to bed every night. Literally, they would go to sleep watching him, and he was the last thing flickering on their screens and on their brains before they went to sleep. And that made a huge impression on people.
I have to ask about the and yet parts. He was a viciously mean drunk, wasn't he?
He could be, yes, especially early on. He did not handle alcohol well. He always said that. And it wasn't like he would drink gallons of it either. When he said I did not drink well, it was, a couple vodkas. And all of a sudden it was like this Jekyll Hyde transformation. He could go from being a reserved, sensible guy to somebody who might throw a punch at you or cause havoc at home, tip over tables at a restaurant. So yes, there is always that part of Johnny.
Married 4 times, innumerable assignations, and one said that asking him about marriage, I shouldn't laugh as I say this, was like asking the captain of the Hindenburg to drive the Goodyear blimp.
It's a good way to put it. That was not mine, by the way. That's, yes.
That was his, right?
Yeah. He knew that he was unlucky in love, and he always knew that The Tonight Show was his most significant other. I mean, that's not unlike a lot of other people who are deeply passionate about and involved in what they do. Mm-hmm. Things fall by the wayside, and he knew that about his marriages. He knew that about his relationships with his sons. He had always wished he was closer with his sons. And I think he felt that especially acutely in 91 when his son Ricky died, which just crushed him. And I have to think part of that was him wishing they could have been closer because they were very alike in a lot of ways.
I found just about the saddest line in the book from one of his sons. And that's an email from Corey Carson, the youngest son, who said, quote, "Work was easy for him, family was not. And this is the part that tugs your heart. It was so hard to see their father enthralled with guests night after night, and not interested in talking to his children."
And then he says, "What did they have that I didn't have?" And it was pretty much 10 minutes of material.
Yeah. I want to play a clip. You're going to know what I'm talking about. It has been called the longest laugh in television history. April 27, 1965, Ed Ames, who was not a scintilla Cherokee but played a character named Mingo on Daniel Boone, was showing Johnny Carson his skill at throwing a tomahawk, threw it at a cowboy figure on a board. How do we say this nicely? He hit the cowboy midsection?
I'd say a little lower than midsection.
A little lower than midsection. All right. Thank you. Longest laugh in television history. What skills do we see on display there in Johnny?
We see Johnny immediately sensing what has gone awry and preventing Ed Ames from actually going to pull the tomahawk out of the board that he's thrown it at. Mm-hmm. So it's sticking there. People are staring at it in the audience.
Camera actually focuses on it.
Camera focuses on it, and he prevents Ed Ames from doing that because Johnny wants to milk the laugh. He knows exactly how long to do that, and then he jumps in with the line.
I didn't even know you were Jewish.
And, as you point out, there's something kind of ironic about that, isn't there?
From my research, Ed Ames actually was Jewish. So, yes. He's making a circumcision joke here, and,
Yeah. Do we miss something these days when people talk about how polarized and divided our culture is, that we don't have somebody who's we have Taylor Swift.
Right. That may
Beyonce.
be the modern day parallel right there in terms of bringing people together. I do like the fact that today there is far more choice, but there isn't a common reference point like there was back in the day. And I guess there is something to be said for that in terms of people communicating with each other about a common thing they saw that wasn't politics. I mean, Johnny would cover politics occasionally, but nobody's saying, "Hey, did you see that? Did you hear that Nixon joke he told?" But it was more about the overall experience. And there was a comfort that Johnny brought to people. He certainly brought that to Bill. Bill's metaphor was that he was, the greatest security blanket this country has ever had. In times good and bad, Johnny was there.
Mike Thomas, who's written with the late Bill Zehme, Carson the Magnificent. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Scott.
This message comes from BetterHelp. It's important to take time to show gratitude towards others, but it's equally important to thank yourself. Life throws a lot of curveballs, and being grateful isn't always easy. Therapy can help remind you of all that you're worthy of and all that you do have. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Try at betterhelp.com/NPR today to get 10% off your first month.
Joe Biden's on his way out, and Donald Trump's on his way back. Want to know what's happening as the presidential transition is underway? The NPR Politics Podcast has you covered with the latest news and analysis. Listen to the NPR Politics Podcast.
Shirley MacLaine has been in movies since the 1950s, and since then, she's become friends with a lot of other famous Hollywood types. Her new memoir, Wall of Life, is structured around the pictures she has of the people she's come to know. But in this interview with Here and Now's Robin Young, it's clear she kept her relationship with her own fame in check. Here's the interview.
Do you have a wall of photos, families, friends, and oh, look, there you are with the Dalai Lama. And is that the Obamas? It is if you're actress and activist Shirley MacLaine, whose marvelous life has intersected Zelig-like with, look, Stephen Hawking. And there she is dancing the can-can with Nikita Khrushchev. In her new book, The Wall of Life, Pictures and Stories from This Marvelous Lifetime, each photo has a single paragraph. We see her as a highly trained dancer in films like Can-Can and Turning Point. Later, Terms of Endearment, for which she won the Best Actress Oscar for Aurora, who among us did not identify with her fear that a newborn wasn't breathing.
Rudyard, she's not breathing.
Honey, she's sleeping. The baby's sleeping.
No. Rudyard, it's crib death.
It's sleep. She's asleep, honey.
Maybe.
She wakes the baby. The photos also show Shirley MacLaine's relentless curiosity about past lives, ancient wisdom, what stories these pictures tell. Shirley MacLaine, we welcome you from, I think, New Mexico. Hi.
Hi, Robin.
Are these literally pictures that you have on the walls in your different homes?
Oh, yes. I started with my first place in California that had a blank wall. And I thought, ooh, I'd like to see what I'm doing. So I put a picture up of whoever I was working with.
Well, we just mentioned Aurora in Terms of Endearment. There's also Weezer, one of the women of a certain age in Steel Magnolias. There's a picture of you and Dolly Parton, Sally Field, Olympia Dukakis. Weezer is a somewhat insufferable rich widow, and this was the role you wanted?
Yes, Herb Ross, the director, asked me what I wanted to do. And I thought, oh, God, I'd love to just be a heavy. That's funny.
I managed in a few decades to marry the two most worthless men in the universe and then proceeded to have the three most ungrateful children ever conceived. The only reason people are nice to me is because I have more money than God.
So, Weezer is part of this, what really is a scrapbook of your life, and it begins with your childhood. There you are. And we see in the adorable pictures at 3, you started dance lessons, and then we see you as a teen. You're trying out different poses in photographs. Then at 16, you go by yourself to New York to make it as a dancer or an actor. Did you ever have any doubt that that's what you should do? 16.
My doubt was whether I would be good enough in class or on stage. My doubts were really based on living up to what I thought I should be capable of doing.
Yeah. There's one time where it would seem you completely overcame that. I'm thinking of Pajama Game. This is on Broadway. You were Carol Haney's understudy, and then never having had a rehearsal, you go on stage.
That's right. She twisted her ankle, and I had never had a rehearsal, but I did watch her from the wings. And I was a pretty good Broadway dancer, and I would dance to myself in the wings watching her. That was my rehearsal.
Wow.
The one thing I was a little skeptical about whether I could do was steam heat. That's a very complicated, with specific movements. Mm-hmm. And you can't drop the hat.
Yeah.
And I dropped the hat.
Oh.
And I said, yes. And the first 5 rows applauded. And I picked it up and wanted to throw it to them, but I thought I better get on with the number.
Back to these pictures, there's you and director Billy Wilder and Jack Lemmon working out a scene for The Apartment. You and your besties Elizabeth Taylor, Lauren Bacall. You have
That's a great picture.
Oh.
The one of Betty and me and Elizabeth.
Betty.
Elizabeth was one of my favorite people. She was an absolute darling lady.
Will you tell a story of how Elizabeth Taylor came over to your house once and dropped on her knees to wash the floor?
She would often do that and just say, oh, my God, all I want to be is a housewife. Of course, I wondered if she thought my floor was filthy, and that's why she helped me. But yes, she did that. She was desperately in need of normality.
Yeah. We know there are friendships in Hollywood. You certainly had maybe more than most. Why do you think you've had these friendships that are so enduring?
Oh, that's a good question. I think everybody likes to hear another person's sense of truth about them. And I'm very interested in people. And of course, I was interested in what to do with fame myself. And I was interested in some of these famous people and what that meant to them. Was that their number one priority, or were they much more interested in reality?
I was going to say, it certainly didn't seem to be yours.
What?
Fame.
Oh, my golly, no.
Yeah.
Of course not.
Yeah.
But I was very interested in the reality of it, or the lack of reality, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah. And I get this sense of you traveling through the industry. You tell me if this is right, that all along the way, you try to figure out people, but you're trying to figure out the industry too.
Yeah.
What would you say about it, having spanned, the golden years, as they call it, till now?
It's in big trouble right now. It's very iffy, and people aren't getting work, and they're not making enough movies. In my day, we made movies all over the place, sometimes 2 at a time, but, I always loved to express in work. That was my favorite thing, but I guess that was my favorite because it happened so young.
Yeah, so young. So young for your marriage as well. And you tell the story through, again, these pictures of your husband.
Yes.
You had a daughter with him, by all accounts, a loving family, but also an open marriage. And in the book, you have pictures of many of the relationships outside your marriage, some very important to you, some casual. Did you ever hesitate to make that public, or it just feels like it was your truth and you were just living by it?
It was my truth, and he didn't object at all. He lived and worked in Japan a great deal, so I was alone. He had a mistress. I knew her, but he was my number one. Never wanted to leave him.
No. And all those other men knew that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I told them.
Yeah. There's an ease that you have talking about your life. Now, I don't know. I mean, maybe there were moments where you were curled in a fetal position about some things. Who knows?
When I was born.
When you were born. Right. Well, born this time. I found myself thinking, Shirley MacLaine, this does feel like she has passed through here once or twice.
Yes.
I don't know. You have a certain completeness. What do you think that is?
Oh, I got interested in metaphysics when I was very young. And I realized that life was about experience. And so the experiences, I probably did manufacture experiences just for that reason. And there was no problem with me understanding the theory of reincarnation. Oh, no, I understood that. And I even remembered some of the incarnations. And that made me a little more familiar with what I was doing with my life. In other words, what I had to come back and do this time.
Yeah.
So it's made life a real pleasure for me.
Well, it sure looks like it in this book. It is astonishing. It's off your wall and in this book now. What is that like to flip through it?
I've been so lucky. I've had an enchanted life, and it's just been stuff you would make a movie out of. And I've known it when I lived it. So I am thinking about the future. How long will I be here? What will it be like when I get too old to move and walk? And what will I do about that? I love being alone, and so I like doing that.
Yeah.
It keeps me in touch with the universe.
Yeah. Oscar-winning acting legend Shirley MacLaine. The new book is The Wall of Life. Shirley MacLaine, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
If they could see me now, that little dusty group traipsing around this $1 million chicken.
And that's it for this week on NPR's Book of the Day. Let us know what you think. You can write to us at bookoftheday@npr.org. I'm Andrew Limbong. The podcast is produced by Danica Panetta and Chloe Weiner and edited by Sierra Crawford. Our founding editor is Petra Mayer. The show elements for this week were produced and edited by Michaela Rodriguez, Mark Navin, Julia Corcoran, Michael Scotto, Ziad Buch, Adriana Gallardo, Danny Hensa, Will Jarvis, and Emiko Tamagawa. Beth Donovan is our managing editor. Thanks for listening.
Support for NPR and the following message come from GoodRx. Did you know GoodRx offers 20 popular diabetes medications for under $20? Check GoodRx before heading to the pharmacy and get up to 80% off your prescriptions. GoodRx is free and easy to use. Search any medication, get your coupon, and start saving. Even if you have insurance or Medicare, GoodRx could beat your copay. See how much you could save on diabetes and everyday prescriptions at goodrx.com/book. This message comes from NPR sponsor Merrill. Whatever your financial goals are, you want a straightforward path there. But the real world doesn't usually work that way. Merrill understands that. That's why, with a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalized plan and a clear path forward. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer, registered investment advisor, member SIPC.